Hello, welcome to WEBS. How are we doing today? All right, good. So we don't have the screen working well, so we're going to start with Trust and Obey. It's going to be number 571. 571, Trust and Obey. And then we'll roll right into Leaning on the Everlasting Arms at 575. So 571, Trust and Obey. Verse 1, 2, 4, and 5. When we walketh the Lord in the light of his word, what a glory he sheds on our way. While we do his good will, he abides with us still, and with all who will trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus than to trust and obey. Verse 2, not a shadow can rise, not a cloud in the sky, but his smile quickly drives it away. Not a doubt or a fear, not a sigh or a tear can abide while we trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus than to trust and obey. Verse 4. But we never can prove the delights of his love until on the altar we lay. For the favor he shows and the joy he bestows are for those who will trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus than to trust and obey. Verse 5. Then in fellowship sweet we will sit at his feet, or we'll walk by his side in the way. What he says he will do, where he sends we will go. Never fear, only trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus than to trust and obey. Amen. 575, Leaning on the Everlasting Arms. What a fellowship, what a joy divine, leaning on the everlasting arms. What a blessedness, what a peace of mind, leaning on the everlasting arms. Leaning, leaning, safe and secure from all alarms. Leaning, leaning, leaning on the everlasting arms. Oh, what sweet to walk in this pilgrim way, leaning on the everlasting arms. Oh, how bright the press grows from day to day, leaning on the everlasting arms. Leaning, safe and secure from all alarms. Leaning on the everlasting arms. What have I to dread? What have I to fear? Leaning on the everlasting arms. I have blessed peace with my Lord so near. Leaning on the everlasting arms. Leaning, safe and secure from all alarms. Leaning on the everlasting arms. Amen, amen. Brother Charlie.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Jen. Hope everybody's having a great week so far. I'm looking forward to hearing from Lee this morning. She's been kind enough to come over and talk to us about, well, you can see right there, estate planning and elder law. A couple of announcements, though. First, don't forget, next Wednesday, we won't be here. We'll have mystery lunch. We're going to Argyle, Texas. That's as close as you're going to get. So we'll see you here at the church about, what time we leaving, Patty? We're going to leave at 11? So be here, about a quarter to 11. We got both the people movers. I'll be driving one, and I'll find a volunteer to drive the other one. So we're headed down to Argyle, so we're looking forward to having a great time. The 28th, I talked with Jan quite a bit this morning already. She has got quite a lineup of hymns for us, for our hymn sing on Sunday, September 28th from 6 to 8, right in here. Bring your favorite cobbler, blackberry if you want. But we're going to have a great time, and some ice cream, some coffee, some hymns, and quite a few hymns, quite a few verses of the hymns, quite a few different people up here performing those hymns or leading us in worship of those hymns. It's a great time to come, and more important, it's a great time for you to ask somebody to come. Ask your neighbor, ask a family member, ask a friend, hey, why don't you come and have some hot cobbler and ice cream with us? Oh, by the way, we're going to sing some hymns. It'll be a great time. State Fair. How many are going to go to the State Fair? How many will go to the State Fair if I drive? Okay, well, enough of that. Camp Copa's Senior Day is Tuesday, October the 7th. That's just right around the corner. I've got 50 spots reserved for our church. Some of you are going to be there anyway. Some of you have already signed up to go just on your own. But this is going to be a great day. It's all free. We'll go out there about 9 in the morning. I think we're done that afternoon. Be a great speaker, a free lunch. Who said there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? But anyway, that'll be a great time, so let us know about that. You can register for all of these things on the church website. And then our Oklahoma City trip, we're going to go up, as we talked about before, on the coach. Then we're going to take the Heartland Flyer Amtrak train back. We've got a lot of activities. There's a sign up right over here and information about that. Again, you can sign up on the website. How many do we have so far for that, Patty? 41 people signed up so far. We've only got room for 50, so don't be caught not going. So anyway, all that being said, lots of things going on all the time, and we just are so grateful and so blessed to be with you and be a part of this ministry. So thank you guys for coming out today. So with that being said, Lee's got a lot to talk to us about, so I think she needs no introduction here, but please make welcome Lee Hilton.
This doesn't have the presentation on the laptop. Is there a way to make that magically happen? If not, I can glance back. But hopefully Brad can make it magically happen. If not, I can look backwards. It'll be easy enough. There we go. Yay. Makes my job a little easier. The other day I had one where I had to look backwards. This speech I give all the time. So I wrote the book about 15 years ago. I've given this speech for over 15 years. And so this one I could probably do entirely without the PowerPoint as far as me remembering what I'm supposed to say. The one that I had it not work for that I had to look backwards was one that I didn't know very well. And so I spent almost the entire speech going like that. So I would hate to do that to you guys. I will actually, there is a slide where I introduce myself. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm going to go through that in just a second. If I can figure this part out. I may have to do it manually. Okay. I think, yep. So today I'm going to talk to you about who gets your stuff when you die. It's 14 secrets to protecting the two most important things in your life, everyone you love and everything you own. So when I was working with a business coach many years ago trying to come up with the tagline for our firm, he said, I want you to pick out your 5 favorite clients. So I went through my clients and I picked out my 5 favorite clients. And I actually realized that they had some things in common, but there was some uniqueness to each one. And so when I brought it to the coach, when we talked through it, we realized that what they had in common, we all have in common, which is they wanted to protect everything that they'd worked all their life to accumulate. Now, I've got some slight bad news for you on that. Most inheritances are treated exactly like lottery winnings. So most people who win $1 million or more in the lottery are actually more broke a year later. So if it's important to you that the people you leave it to actually preserve the money, then you're going to want to put certain protections on it. And then everyone we love. So we want to make sure that the people we're leaving money to, that they're taken care of. We also, one of the things that I'm going to talk to you about a little bit that none of us really think about, we want to make sure we're taken care of if we need care. And that may happen along the way. So another title for this would be How to Protect Your Family Without Having to Give Up Control. So if you were to put together a plan today, either a will or a trust, and we'll go through the differences between the two in a minute. Today, you know what year it is, you know what your assets are, and you know who your family is. So you have absolute control over thinking through who gets your stuff when you die and who's in charge if somebody needs to help you medically or financially. But if you wait until you can't remember who you are, then you're not going to have that control anymore. And one of the things I try to mention in every speech I give is most families are dysfunctional. Some of you are lucky enough that we have to get into maybe cousins or second cousins before we hit the dysfunction. For some of us, it's closer to home. So one of the reasons why you're going to want to plan while you have control is to make sure the people in your life that are dysfunctional don't become in charge of you. So what you're going to discover today is ways to promote family harmony, how to leave your assets behind in a way that they don't ruin the people you're leaving it to, how to protect yourself if you need care, and how to obtain peace of mind you've done the best job possible in taking care of yourself. This is for you if you're worried about your children getting along after you're gone. I do have a tendency in my speeches to talk about children. A lot of my clients don't have children. So some of my clients are leaving money to nieces and nephews or to their best friends or to charities. So anytime I talk about children, if you don't have children, just mentally substitute who you're leaving money to for that. If you're worried who's going to take care of you if you need care, if you're tired about worrying about your family, and if you're confused by conflicting advice. So nowadays, we can search on the internet and we can find advice on absolutely anything. But how do we know it's accurate? And it's getting scarier as what people are counting on the computer to do. So the will kits you can get online, and you can do your own will or trust online. It's an inexpensive way to put it together. They actually say that statistically 2 out of every 10 work smoothly. In the last 3 years, our firm has actually probated the 3 that did not work smoothly. Let me give you an example of one of them. It was a man who had family land. It had been in the family since 1845. So his great-great-great-grandfather had gotten it as a land grant from the state of Texas when the state of Texas was formed. It had been passed down to generations. He owned part of it. His brother owned the other part. He had 3 kids, and when he asked the 3 kids what they wanted, which one of them wanted the land, all 3 said, "We have absolutely no desire to live out in the country. The moment you pass away, we're going to sell it." So this man decided he wanted to leave this land to his brother. He decided he didn't want to pay an attorney to do it. And so he went online and he created his own will. And when he created his own will, he said, all of my business property and all of my personal property go to my brother. Now, when we went in to probate that will, we actually had several family members and friends testify as to what he meant. He 100% wanted the real estate to go to his brother. But the judge said, really sorry, but there's years and years of case law and even statutes that define personal property as not real estate. So his will only covered a few insignificant items. The land that he cared about, it did not cover that. So what happens when you pass away without a will is the court has to determine who your family is. So they had to hire a private investigator, had to look to see if he had any other kids, any other marriages. Now the end result was his 3 kids were who were supposed to inherit. So after a year of this process, the court determined that the 3 kids got the land. There was a for sale sign on the land prior to that court ruling. That land was sold right away. So if, in order to save a few $1,000s, he had done it on his own, but what he really wanted to have happen didn't happen. So nowadays they're getting us more and more trained to rely on AI. I don't know if you've seen the commercial, but there's a commercial where it says, I don't know if it's Siri or it's one of them, but they come on and they say, you usually order this particular pizza from this particular place on Tuesdays. Would you like me to do that? And the guy says, yes, of course. And then it does some other things he does on a regular basis. And so we're getting more and more used to the computer totally taking care of all the things we need. So you can also go on and say, hey, Google, write me a will. Or go into an AI program and have them write you a will. But they're not sophisticated enough to do it. Now, we fast forward 10, 20 years, who knows what computers will be doing for us at that point. But at this point, there's a lot of danger, and there's actually 2 court cases where an attorney counted on an AI to write a brief for a court, and the AI didn't want, they say it actually has a thing in its programming where it doesn't want to disappoint you. So when you ask a question, it will try to make up an answer or find an answer. And so what the AI had done to both of these attorneys is it had made up a court case. It had written a brilliant brief based on this pretend court case, and that attorney, without checking to make sure it was accurate, submitted it to the court. Both of those attorneys lost their right to practice law. So why I bring that up is we are counting on doing things, and as time goes on, it may get better. But we've got to be sure that we're relying on somebody who knows what they're doing as far as putting things together. I'm going to skip that one. So for those of you that don't know me, and actually looking out, there's a few faces I don't recognize. My name is Lee Hilton. I own a local firm. We do both estate planning and we do elder law. So the estate planning is the who gets your stuff when you die. Elder law is protecting assets if you have to go to the nursing home. Most firms do one or the other. The reason why I added in elder law to what I did probably about 20 years ago is I started having my clients have their parents need care, and the parents started losing everything that they'd worked all their lives to accumulate to that care, to having to do that care. And so I'll talk to you, there's a slide in here that talks through a little bit about how to protect assets. We've also helped, I'm trying to think what, we switched our numbers recently. Yeah, it's 300 families implement the plans that we've designed, and over 1,200 families implement the plans that other people have designed. And the reason why that's significant to you is for most of you, you're going to put together a plan, you're going to put it on the shelf, and you're going to forget about it. But what's important to you is it actually works when the time comes. And the fact that we've walked alongside families has allowed us to make sure that we work as smoothly as possible with people and making it pass to the next generation. We also belong to organizations. There's 5 attorneys in our office. We have 20 support staff. And we also belong to organizations with 3,000 attorneys nationwide. So we can learn from not only the 5 attorneys in our office, but also from the other attorneys. And I'll give you some examples of that as we go along. So locations, I've got an office here in Denton, I have an office in Aubrey, and we have an office in Bartonville. You've got the book in front of you, the Who Gets Your Stuff When You Die. If you don't have it in front of you, it's on the table. They're free if you want to take one. I've got 3 other books, and if you're interested in them, you can contact our office, and we'll give those to you for free also. One is what your family should know if something happens to you, and the other is what your spouse should know if something happens to you. These are related books, but the main point is what are the things one of the hard things when somebody passes away is trying to locate all the assets to figure out what needs to be done. And also knowing how to take care of the house during the period of time before it's sold. And so one of the things that this book has is a whole lot of checklists of things that your family or spouse would need to know if something happens. These are also on our website, and you can download them to fill them out. And it'll kind of trigger your memory of things that other people need to know. And then the last book is Finding Strength in the Face of Alzheimer's. And the reason why I wrote this book is I've watched a lot of people walk through this journey. I actually had 2 women who were taking care of their husbands with Alzheimer's. The women were healthy, but they died first. And they actually say that 60% of caregivers of somebody with Alzheimer's die first. And these 2 ladies both died from pneumonia, but I really think they died from exhaustion because I watched them decline from taking care of somebody 24 hours a day. They also, what I see a lot is people forget to take care of themselves. So you're taking care of your spouse, you need to have surgery, you put off the surgery because you're taking care of your spouse, and that's one of the reasons. So part of it's reminding you to take care of yourself. Skip ground rules. Ground rules is just to tell you to turn off your phone. All right, so distributing your stuff, choosing who's going to get your stuff and helping them keep it. So when you meet with an attorney, we're going to ask you nosy questions about the people you're leaving money to. And we're looking for several things. One of the questions we're going to ask you is, are they responsible? And I usually start with, what do they do for a living? Are they married? A little bit about the kids. But really what I'm looking for is 3 questions. They're all related to responsible. So are they responsible enough to manage the money they currently have? Are they responsible enough to manage the money you were going to give them? And would they be responsible enough to manage your money if you needed somebody to do that? And I'm also going to ask you about their spouses, because you guys probably know stories of spouses influencing people to do different things that they shouldn't. And so we want to make sure that we're clear that whoever you name, their spouse wouldn't influence them to do something. And then handle with care stuff. What to do if a beneficiary is disabled. So other thing I forgot to tell you guys. In the book, every slide that I'm going to go through, there's a chapter in the book. So my initial publisher was one of my clients, and he told me if I took this speech and I transcribed it, I would have a book. No, I would have 1/8 of a book. I spent another 2 years writing the other 7/8 of the book. So there's a lot more examples, a lot more detail in the book itself. There's also on my website, there are individual speeches for each chapter of the book. So this speech is more what we would call issue spotting for attorneys, which is it gives you enough information to know you want more information. And so there's a way you can kind of look. So specifically, if you have a beneficiary who's disabled and they're on what they call needs-based government benefits. So if you had a grandchild who was born with a disability, is never going to be able to work, never be able to take care of themselves, when they turn 18, they will be eligible for SSI, and SSI is a Social Security program that gives them income for life. That gives them around $800 a month. That is supposed to cover housing. It used to have to cover food. It now only covers housing. But if you were to leave more than $2,000 to that grandchild, it throws them off of that benefit. So we've got to be really careful if you have a beneficiary with a disability. So stuff happens, smart moves if you or your spouse are diagnosed with Alzheimer's or dementia. Now, I started out by telling you the sooner you plan, the more control you can maintain. A few years ago, I had a couple come in. The husband had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's 8 years before they came in to see me. Now, one of the things I bet you've been around people who start to become incompetent. So one of the hard things with a dementia or Alzheimer's diagnosis that a lot of people don't realize is you're not incompetent the moment you're diagnosed. Because for the purposes of creating documents, you've got to know who your family is, you've got to know what year it is, and you've got to know what your assets are, and you have to be able to hold those things in your head and make a logical decision. That's a pretty low bar as far as competency. And you can have Alzheimer's or dementia and still pass that test. But this particular man, because he waited 8 years, at the time he came in, he knew he liked his wife, but he wasn't quite sure how she was related to him. He didn't know how to spell his own name. And so we can't do documents at that point. We can't, he's given up his ability to make his own decisions. Now we can change her documents to make sure he's not in charge of her money if something happens to her, but he can no longer do documents. And part of why I bring that up, and the next slide I'll talk about, we all should just put together documents while we know what's going on, just in case something happens. So the next slide is incapacity stuff. What if you're out of it? That's kind of depressing to think about already. We might die someday, and we're talking about that. Second piece of the puzzle is, what if we become incompetent? What if we get to the point where we can't make our own financial decisions? Who do we trust to do that, and how are they going to be able to step in? So real quick, let me tell you the difference between a will and a trust. Wills and trusts both specify who gets your stuff when you die. The distinction is, does somebody have to go to court? So if you have a will and you pass away, the only way the will is effective to do anything is it has to go through a court process called probate. Probate in Texas takes about 6 months, costs around $7,000. You will read on the internet that probate in Texas is no big deal. And the reason why they say that is because if you lived in New York, Florida, California, or Oklahoma, of all places, it actually takes over a year and costs $25,000 to $30,000 to probate a will. So in those states, most people have a trust. In the state of Texas, they consider probate simple because it's only $7,000 and it only takes 6 months. The reason why I started talking to my clients about doing trusts is I had 3 different women come in to do probates with me. All 3 of them were in their 50s. And when I sat there in court with them, I thought, if my husband died, would I want to go through this process? And the answer is no. Now, our firm does 8 of them a month. At the time, I was doing 8 of them a month. I know the process. The process is relatively easy, unless you're the one that has had a loved one die. But in that process, the attorney's having to ask you, did your loved one die on this date? Do you guys own these assets? Is this your family? And that's really hard to answer when you've lost a loved one. If you have a trust instead, the trust actually would allow whoever you name next to be in charge immediately without having to go to court. The other advantage to a trust that most of us don't want to think about is if we become incompetent, so we get to the point where we can't manage our own finances, the trust would allow us to name who's in charge next. It also keeps the dysfunctional people from being able to step in. So I talk to people frequently that will tell me that they don't have a good relationship with one of their children. They haven't spoken to them in 10, 15 years. And they'll initially say, there's no way they're going to come in and try to be in charge of me financially. I can tell you lots of stories of them trying to step in. It's usually they're more focused on protecting your money for their inheritance than they are of taking care of you. So a trust can make it where you can make sure that the right people take care of you and that the wrong people never get a chance to do that. So healthcare stuff, who makes your healthcare decisions for you if you can't? So I talk to mothers and daughters all the time where mom says, I don't want to be kept alive on machines. And the daughter says, Mom, I'm going to put you on every machine possible because I can't imagine letting you go. Who does mom put in charge? That daughter, every time. Now what she's thinking is, I've told her what I want. She's a good daughter. She's going to do what I've asked. What the daughter thinks is, Mom wouldn't have put me in charge if she didn't agree with what I wanted to have done. Now, it's a hard mind shift or thing to think through, but if you're ever appointed to make medical decisions for somebody else, you're supposed to make it based on what they would want. Not what you want, what they would want. Now, most of the time, you don't have the information. So the other thing I highly encourage is whoever you've named to make those decisions, you have the hard conversations where you say what you want and what you don't want. Most of my clients don't want to be kept alive on machines if it's pretty much terminal and they've got less than 6 months to live, even if they're put on every machine possible. But everybody who makes that decision wants something a little bit different. And so if you haven't expressed that to your family, they're not going to know where your line is, what you want as far as care and what you don't want as far as care. So it's more, actually, honestly, it's more for their peace of mind, because at the point where they're making decisions, you're going to be unconscious. Because if you can communicate, you get to make decisions. But if they can say, my aunt put me in charge and she told me she wanted these things, then they have a peace of mind they've done what you've asked. So HIPAA is the privacy law. HIPAA was passed in 2001. HIPAA was passed because doctors and hospitals were selling medical information. It was designed to stop that. Now, anything that the legislature passes that's designed to do anything, there's always a workaround. But with HIPAA, its whole purpose was to keep them from doing that. The problem with HIPAA is that there's not a standard form. So if you wanted to have people be able to check on you in the hospital, talk to the doctors, find out what's going on medically, there's not a standard form. So we prepare a list of people you want to have be able to check on you in the hospital. We also add language to your financial and medical power of attorney that allows them to sign whatever the doctor wants signed. And that way they get access if they need it. The other thing that's important with HIPAA that a lot of attorneys still haven't caught on to is what if somebody's in charge of your trust for you? So what if you've allowed your son to take over your trust and he then becomes incompetent? How does somebody know they need to step in? And the reason why we knew to add that is one of the attorneys in the larger group, the 3,000 attorneys nationwide, had a situation where the mom had allowed the son to be in charge of the trust. The son had started acting erratically, so the daughter was a little concerned that he might be having some trouble. She had no right to look at his medical records, so she went to court and she got a court order. Turned out he was having trouble, ended up having a nervous breakdown, ended up getting treatment and then got better. Now, the good news is he didn't do anything bad with mom's money, so it worked out good that way. And he did get treatment and he got better. So we've added to our documents language that says if anybody steps in to take over, they've got to let the next in line have access to medical information. The other thing that we've added to our documents that a lot of attorneys with trusts don't think about is a situation. Let me tell you what happened. So there was a lady, there was another attorney up north. A lady was in a car wreck. She was in a coma for a period of time. Her son took over as trustee. She got out of the hospital, she got better, and she went to her son and said, "Thank you for taking good care of me and my trust and the money while I was in the hospital. Now that I'm out, I want to be back in charge." And his response was, "Mom, I really like being in charge. And I'm a little concerned that if I let you be in charge, you're going to give more money to my sister than to me." And so this poor lady had to fight in court with her own son to get control of her own money. So we have language that if you get better, you get to step back in without any court involvement. So that way you don't have that situation come up. So who needs benefits? I'm going to talk to you really, really briefly about veterans benefits and Medicaid. So VA benefits in particular, if you have a disability and you served in the military, it's worth talking to the Denton County VA office about whether you qualify for a VA disability payment. The Denton County VA office, I think, is one of the better ones in the state of Texas. They're very helpful. And the people that run it are actually disabled veterans. And so they'll help you get as many benefits as you can. The one that we help with is called Aid and Attendance. The rules for it is you have to have served 90 days active duty, 1 day during a defined period of war, and you have to have a need for care. The federal government will then provide about $2,000 a month. If you're a widow of a veteran, it's about $1,600 a month. No, sorry, it's about $1,100 a month. If you're a spouse of a veteran, it's about $1,600 a month. Not enough to take care of you 24 hours a day, but enough to help. What they do as far as requirements, it's the income you have coming in minus your medical expenses. When it drops below $2,000, that's when the government steps in to help. The other type of benefit that I help people with is Medicaid. So Medicaid, so everybody gets a little confused between Medicaid and Medicare. So Medicare, you get because you're 65 and you meet certain criteria. Medicare only pays for the first 100 days in a nursing home or in a rehab. After the 100 days, you either privately pay or Medicaid kicks in. So one way to remember is Medicaid ends in aid. So it's similar to food stamps in a way. It's when you're broke, they step in and help. If you were to transfer assets or do some protective things with your assets, 5 years before you need Medicaid, you can protect assets. VA benefits, it's 3 years beforehand. And a lot of our clients do it if they have family land that they want to make sure that they're able to pass down to the next generation. So protecting stuff after it's there. So the beneficiaries, I told you I'm going to ask you about them being responsible. So if you have an irresponsible beneficiary, you're going to put somebody else in charge to manage the money for them. But what if you have a responsible beneficiary, someone that you're leaving money to that you have no doubt they're going to do the right thing with it? A lot of our clients still want to protect it just in case they get divorced or sued or have creditor problems. Also, for my clients who have grandkids, it's very important to them that what they leave to the kids makes it to the grandkids. Because if you leave money to your daughter is going to leave it to her husband. And when he remarries, which 83% of men who lose a spouse do, he's going to leave it to the next wife, which means the grandkids would not end up with it. So if it's important to you that it gets to the grandkids, there's a way we can add language that does that. So important stuff, how to communicate your values to the next generation. In the plans that we do more charitable gifts than other attorneys. And the reason why is kind of very simple. We just ask a question. So in asking you all the other nosy things I'm asking you, I'm going to ask you, do you want to leave anything to a charity? Now you can say yes or no. I'm not going to judge you either way. I told another attorney that, and he said, oh, that's too nosy. I would never ask that. Well, a lot of people, when I bring it up, actually say, I regularly give to charities. Why would I not want to include that in what I'm doing? Also, a lot of our clients think education is important. So they want to make sure that the next generation has an opportunity to get educated. So they'll create a pool of money to educate nieces and nephews or descendants, grandchildren, things like that. If you do that, I'm going to tell you two stories. One was my friend Sean in law school. So when we graduated from law school, Sean was actually on her 20th year of education after high school. And when we graduated, she was actually trying to figure out what her next degree was going to be. And the reason why is her grandfather had this trust, and the rules were she had to be going to school full time, she had to make good grades, and she had to be seeking a degree she didn't already have. So by the time I met her, she already had a doctorate. She was working on the law degree. There's another law degree called a master's in law you can do, so she had her next 2 years planned out. I did not keep track of Sean. I almost bet she became a medical doctor next, because that's pretty much all she had left. I don't think her grandfather really meant for that to be what happened, but that is how it got worded. I had a client, after I mentioned that in a speech, come to me and they said, do you want to hear a worse story? So the other set of grandparents had set up a trust for the grandchildren, and what it said was the grandchildren had to be making good grades, and they had to not have already graduated, and everything they needed would be paid for. So their grandson, for the last 5 years, had been taking one class, the easiest one possible, and then playing video games and having everything he needed paid for. Not what the grandparent probably intended. So you got to be somewhat careful in how you word these. So retirement plans. So retirement plans, we can also protect those against divorce creditors and lawsuits when they go to your beneficiaries, but we've got to add in specialized language to do that. And we do that through something called a retirement plan trust. So finding stuff and organizing stuff. If you hide money anywhere, write it down somewhere. Now, I had a lady, it's probably been 10 years ago now. She raised her hand in one of my speeches and she said, I have $10,000 in silver bars buried in my backyard, but I don't remember where. So there was a man in the audience who happened to have a metal detector. He did help her find it. But think about it. If she hadn't, one, remembered it was there, how would the family know to look for it? So if you buy a house, use a metal detector, look around the yard just in case. There's also one more story on that, and then I'll switch to the next one. There was a lady who had $100 bills in big stacks in tin foil or aluminum foil in her freezer. Daughter went in and just figured mom had been in the hospital for a period of time. She was literally just going to rake the freezer into a garbage bag. And she picked it up, and she thought it was frozen meat, and it just felt weirdly light. And she opened it up, and there was actually thousands of dollars in that freezer. So if you do something like that, if people don't know, They may not do that. Also, if you have anybody who's passed away, there's a place where you can check for unclaimed funds. It's called claimittexas.org. If you go to that website, you can look to see if there's anything that that person had. Also, you can look up your own name because there might be something that you have lost over the years. So second marriage stuff, how to protect your spouse and your kids. So in a second marriage, if you leave everything to your spouse, you are probably disinheriting your kids. And the reason why that happens is at the time you pass away, your spouse may not end up being as close to their stepchildren as they are to their actual children. And so because of that, they may decide to leave everything to their kids. So a lot of my clients in second marriages will leave everything to their spouse in a trust. Spouse can use it for anything they need or want, but whatever's left has to go to the children. Now, I used to only talk to you about that in second marriages until I told you most families are dysfunctional. I do represent what I call fairy tale families, and I have several of them. Fairy tale families are where everybody gets along, nothing ever goes wrong, everything's beautiful. And we've got to be careful with fairy tale families because if you put stress on them, things can happen. So this is one of my fairy tale families, really nice couple. They were married over 65 years. She got Alzheimer's, and they hired a full-time caregiver. The full-time caregiver they hired happened to be his high school sweetheart. So she took care of both of them, and then the wife passed away. And then the high school sweetheart and the man got married. And amazingly, the fairy tale family actually is very happy with that. Very loved the new wife, was happy that she was around. So he came in to redo his will. I didn't tell you, 4 kids, 12 grandkids, some number of great-grandkids, huge family. Can you guess who he left everything to? New wife. And his logic was, if you think about it, at that point, the kids are completely raised. They have their own grandkids. They don't need the money. But I started thinking about it. James and I have been married 36 years. If I die, I want him to be able to spend everything we've accumulated together. But whatever's left, I want to have go to our boys. So even in a first marriage, you may want to put in that protection. Because I've seen people with a remarriage. The other thing that sometimes happens is one of your kids is going to try to be the favorite kid and influence you to leave it to the favorite kid. And I don't want that to happen either. So sentimental stuff. Saving your family, conflict and confusion over personal property. When I wrote this book 15 years ago, your kids wanted your stuff. The most common complaint I have now is that the kids don't want stuff. I was meeting with a lady and her 3 kids the other day, and she made that comment. And we had actually been meeting for an entire hour. They got along really well. They were laughing, joking, really nice family. And after she made the comment, the daughter said, "The only thing I want is the painting above the fireplace in the living room." You know what the other 2 said? That's the only thing we want also. But because you spoke up first, you can have it. But there was this tension that wasn't there before. So you've also got to be careful you don't promise it to more than one person, or you don't get rid of it and forget to tell other people that you've gotten rid of it. If there's a story behind it, make sure you write it down. So last one is till we meet again. Has it been over 3 years since you met with the attorney that designed your plan? Because a lot of people will tell me that they put together a plan when the kids were little, and they haven't updated it since. And they'll joke that the kids probably don't want to go live with grandma. But when you wrote the plan when the kids were little, you probably assumed you would have a fairy tale family where everything's beautiful, which you may. Hopefully you do. But you wouldn't have in any place in your plan put those kids in charge because they're little. So it's worth updating. We meet with our clients every 3 years to check in and see how things are going. And then, I don't have a slide for this, but I'll go into it. I have a short testimony thing to tell you guys, just so you have an idea of how we work. Years and years ago, James and I belonged to a very small church, Cooper Creek Baptist Church. There were 178 people in the church. They built a building they could not afford. And so they were struggling to make payments on the building, and so they were constantly fundraising. And so they were constantly asking me to do things that are not in my skill set. So I can tell you lots of them. I don't cook well, I don't sew, I don't garden. Anyway, so I started praying to God. It's like, I want to help raise money for the church, but I want it to be within my skill set. So how can I do that? And God impressed upon me that the way I could do it is I could do what I do for a living to raise money for the church. So, I don't know if God's done this with you guys in your life, but he takes you little baby steps and then you end up somewhere you would have never thought you would end up. So initial baby step in a church with 178 people, I probably did one will a month for the church. So when we moved to First Baptist, I actually prayed to God and tried to put a limit on it. So I prayed to God and I said, okay, God, this is a huge church. I'll do one a month. And so we did that for a period of time. And then he finally said, trust me. And so I actually had 1 month where all of our revenue, every dime of it, was from people at this church. But he provides for us in a way that we were able to do that. So he provided for us in other months to the point where we had money and it was fine. And it's really kind of, I'm a little choked out because it's an amazing blessing for God to walk alongside you like that. So point of telling you that, if you come into our office, we're going to talk to you about what you want to put together. We're going to quote you prices like we would for anybody else. And then we're going to have you write a check to the church for that amount. You pay actually half up front in a check to the church, half at the end to the church. In some ways, I don't like you to know that ahead of time because I want you to see value in what we do. So it's not going to be taken out of the tithe you've already given. I want it to be added to what the church receives. And I want you to understand or think of it as what we're doing has that value. But I want to let you know that that's one of the things that we do. And if you meet with one of the other 4 attorneys and they don't know, you can just tell them to ask me. They should know, but they might not realize it initially. So where do you go from here? Most people end up procrastinating. So prior to writing this book, I used to hand out blue folders. And in the last month, I've had 3 people with blue folders come in. They've told me they came to a speech 15 years ago. They planned on using me, thought it would be good to put together their documents, but didn't think that they had a need at the moment. So sometimes it takes somebody needing surgery or going out of town for them to realize that they might actually be mortal. It's much better to put together a plan where you know those 3 important things, what year it is, who your family is, and what your assets are, instead of waiting until there's a crisis. So, and it's a much easier conversation where it's if I pass away, if I become incompetent, as compared to seeing it coming. Now, we work with people all the time that do see it coming, but it's an easier conversation when you do it earlier. I'm going to take a drink, and then I'll answer whatever questions you guys have. I think I only put 2 people to sleep. I will not point them out. I always ponder, especially the people that fall asleep like this and they go like that over and over, whether they know they're doing it. But anyway, that's just a curiosity thing from up here. Trust. Okay, so his question was, what happens when they go to open a new bank account and the bank won't put the account in the name of the trust? I don't know what has changed in the last year, but we used to not have that problem. And for some reason, we're having that problem more and more. So if the question is, would your people who are next in line in your trust need that money to pay bills if you were incompetent? So if it's a big account, then you need to find someplace that will let you put it in the name of the trust. If it's a small account, you can do a payable on death beneficiary to your trust. But one of the advantages to the trust is that it allows somebody to step in and pay your bills and take care of you. If they don't have access to your money, they're not going to be able to do that. But we are running into more and more problems regarding getting banks to do that. I've not gotten a good answer. I've been trying to pursue that. But I have not gotten a good answer. And it's weirdly not consistent as far as the size of the bank. So it's not like small banks are saying they require that or big banks are. It's just a random combination of banks. One of the ones that's causing a lot of our clients trouble right now is DATCU, and they have a new president, and apparently she has decided she doesn't like accounts to be in the name of the trust. So we're having quite a bit of trouble with DATCU, which is sad because it's a great institution. And I have lots of clients who have very large accounts there. And so several of them are moving to other financial institutions so that they can have it be in the name of their trust. But I can't get to her directly, but I have gotten to several board members, and they have decided they don't want to make a change. Other questions? Well, thank you guys. And like I said, the books are on the table if you're interested in getting one.